Have you ever walked away from a woman feeling like something invisible was taken from you? Not your money, not your time. But something deeper, like your power. As if, somewhere between your smile and her silence, she scanned you, measured you, and walked away with something you didn't even realize you'd given up. And you're left wondering, how? How did she get stronger by saying nothing? Why did every effort you made to connect, to impress, to please, only make you feel smaller? This isn't about manipulation. It's not about tricks or games. This is about something older, something primal. A truth that most men never learn. Women aren't outplayed with words. They're outplayed with presence. And nature knew that long before you and I ever showed up. Because the world raised us, especially men, to believe power is loud. Be louder. Be smarter. Be richer. Say the right thing. Perform. Project. Persuade. But nobody told you the most terrifying and magnetic force a man can wield is his stillness. His ability to not react. To let silence hang in the air and not flinch. To let the chaos scream and not move. Like a king watching peasants shout in the square, unmoved by the noise. Because nature never taught power through appeasement. Especially not for the ones who thrive on your need to be seen, heard, and validated. See, the man who has mastered himself no longer needs to explain himself. Because explanation is, at its core, a form of apology. And any man who apologizes for existing will always be ruled by those who don't. Most guys believe dominance starts with confidence. With words. With delivery. But Nietzsche flipped that idea upside down. He believed true dominance begins when a man no longer needs to speak. Because speech, more often than not, is the tool of the desperate. The man who must convince or explain is already under the power of the one who doesn't need to. Nietzsche once said, "The voice of beauty speaks softly. It creeps only into the most awakened souls." So if beauty doesn't shout, why are you? If power whispers, why are you still yelling, chasing, proving? Because deep down, you think women fall for what you say. But here's the brutal truth. She's watching what you tolerate. How fast you chase. How easily you bend. She's listening to what you're saying. Without you saying a word. Here's what nature always understood about women, and what most men can't bring themselves to accept. Women aren't weak. They're not the lesser. They are nature's most refined tacticians. Fluid. Intuitive. Subtle. Strategic. While men dominate through force, logic, and control, women lead through energy, emotion, and absence. And that's why most men lose. They come in swinging, trying to overpower the ocean with a hammer. And then wonder why everything they built falls apart when she goes quiet. You want to outsmart a woman? Then outgrow the boy inside you. The one that needs to be liked. The one who panics when she pulls away. The one who texts when she goes silent. Who argues to prove his point. Who gets angry when she doesn't respond. That boy? He's prey. But the man, the real man, the one Nietzsche spoke of? He doesn't chase. He doesn't beg. He doesn't debate to earn validation. He withdraws. Not to punish. But out of principle. And that withdrawal? That calm, intentional, unexplainable silence? It does something no speech ever could. Because in that moment, she can't read you. She can't predict you. And women fear nothing more than a man they can't decode. This is where everything flips. Not in what you say, but in your refusal to play her game. When you stop reacting to her silence? When you stop explaining your actions? When you stop engaging with her emotional push and pull? Something inside her starts to unravel. Not you, her. Because a man who doesn't explain himself becomes a mirror. And most women can't manipulate mirrors, they're used to being them. They're used to reflecting. Not being reflected. Most women are used to men folding the moment they pull back. They test, men chase. They withdraw, men reach. They provoke, men react. And every time you do, you confirm her belief. She's in control. But the man who just watches? Who stays composed while the tension builds? Who lets the silence stretch without breaking? He becomes unpredictable. And in that unpredictability, he becomes irresistible. Not because he tried, but because he didn't. Nietzsche said, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." Let me say that another way. Every time you fight for attention, for validation, for control, you lose yourself. You become the very thing you were trying to escape. A man trapped in need. But the Übermensch? The evolved man? He shapes the world. He doesn't get shaped by it. And to shape the world, you must first master the urge to be understood. Because the need to be understood? That's the addiction of the weak. The moment you crave her understanding, her approval, you're done. She doesn't need to understand you. She needs to feel that you don't care whether she does. That is real male sovereignty. Not cruelty. Not coldness. but that rare, rattling calm of a man who doesn't need anything from her to be complete. The kind of man who can walk away mid-sentence. Who can sit through a cold shoulder without flinching. Who can go unread, unanswered, and untouched. Not because he's playing games, but because he no longer plays at all. This isn't manipulation. It's liberation. And that's where we'll pause. You want to truly outsmart a woman? Then outgrow the boy within you first. The boy who panics when she pulls away. The boy who can't handle silence, who instantly texts when she goes quiet, who gets angry when she doesn't show him the respect he thinks he's earned. The boy who argues just to prove he matters. That boy? She's seen him 100 times before. And to her, he's just a meal, something to chew up, digest, and forget. But a man? A real man? A Nietzschean man? He doesn't explain, doesn't complain, and doesn't chase. He simply withdraws. Not as a move in some manipulative game, but as a principle. And that withdrawal, that quiet, steady, unshakable silence, is more powerful than anything you could ever say. It doesn't punish her. It reflects her. It forces her to face something she never expected, the reality that she no longer has power over you. That silence? It's not empty. It's full of the weight of presence, of dignity, of a man who cannot be manipulated. And that unsettles her more than any argument ever could. Most women are used to men who fold at the first sign of emotional discomfort. They know exactly which buttons to press to make a man react. Pleading, chasing, justifying, it all confirms what she already believes, that she holds the power. But not you. Not anymore. You've seen through the illusion. You let the silence hang. You let the tension rise. You watch calmly as she tries every tactic she knows, and you give her nothing. That's where your power is born, in becoming unreadable. Because what a woman fears most isn't what you say. It's when she can't tell what you're thinking. When she can't predict your next move. When her silence doesn't shake you. That's when you stop being just another man and become a riddle she can't solve. And there's nothing more magnetic than a mystery she can't decode. Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." That doesn't just apply to enemies. It applies to emotional chaos. To begging for attention. To chasing explanations. Every time you react to her drama, you become the thing you're trying to escape, a man enslaved to validation. But the Übermensch, the higher man, doesn't operate from a place of reaction. He doesn't flinch. He shapes his world instead of being shaped by it. And how does he do that? By mastering the urge to be understood. Let's be honest, most men want to be understood. You want her to get your pain, to see your heart, to recognize your effort. But here's the brutal truth, the second you need her to understand you, you've already given her the upper hand. Because true sovereignty isn't about her understanding you. It's about not caring whether she does. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. A man who's anchored in his own truth doesn't explain it. He lives it. He walks away mid-conversation if that's what his peace requires. He sits in silence when others demand reaction. He leaves texts on read. Not to play games. But because he's already chosen himself. Because his validation doesn't come from her response, it comes from within. And this isn't about manipulation. It's about liberation. Because the thing that makes most men predictable is their craving. Craving her attention. Craving her validation. Craving her love like it's oxygen. But that craving? That's not love. That's dependency. And dependency is just a pretty word for slavery. As long as you crave her attention, you are not her partner. You are her subject. And she knows it. So how do you break that cycle? How do you stop being the predictable man who reacts, explains, and chases? You master detachment. Detachment isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's about being so rooted in your own value that her leaving doesn't shake you. That her insults don't move you. That her emotional storms don't drown you. When you master detachment, your silence becomes presence. Not the absence of words, but the fullness of will. Imagine the strength it takes to let her walk away and say nothing. To hear her accuse you and stay unmoved. To feel her test your boundaries and not even blink. That silence? That's not passive. It's power, weaponized. Because when you say nothing, she hears everything. She hears her own insecurities echoing back. She hears her own games exposed. She hears a kind of masculine force she doesn't know how to manage. You become the mirror. And women don't know what to do when they're the ones being reflected. They're used to being the ones holding the mirror. They're not used to facing it. Nietzsche didn't write for men who wanted to be nice. He wrote for men who wanted to be dangerous, not in a reckless way, but in a way that radiates inner strength. He wrote for the kind of man who doesn't flinch when left alone, who doesn't explain his every move, who doesn't apologize just to keep others comfortable. That includes women. You don't outsmart a woman by being clever. You outsmart her by becoming the one man who can't be controlled, the one man who doesn't break under pressure, the one man who sees her moods for what they are, tests, not truths. And here's why silence messes with her: it flips the dynamic. Women are used to having control over men's emotions. Your attention. Your time. Your energy. Every time you bit your tongue to avoid an argument, every time you tried to keep her calm, every time you shrank yourself to keep her happy, you taught her something. You taught her you were afraid to lose her. That your identity was tied to her reaction. That your peace could be negotiated. But when you stop negotiating, something primal happens. She realizes she no longer owns the script. That you are not afraid to walk. That your peace is not on the table. And when that hits her, when she sees that she can't move you like she used to, that's when everything shifts. Because for the first time, she's not in control of your emotions. She's facing her own. She's facing the weight of her own silence. The tension of her own tactics. The stillness of a man who doesn't orbit her anymore. A man who stands like a mountain, still and unmoved, while the storm rages. And mountains don't move to chase storms. They wait for storms to pass. That's where your power begins. Let her test you. Let her question you. Let her try everything. And say nothing. Not because you're playing a part, but because you're done being played. When the noise dies down, when her moves don't work, when her provocations get no reaction, she'll start talking. Not to argue, but to understand. Because the man who doesn't need her attention is the man she starts craving most. And that's not game. That's nature. Let's get one thing straight. A woman can play 100 games with 100 different men, but she will never forget the one man who didn't play at all. The one man who didn't flinch. The one man who didn't beg for clarity, or closure, or connection. He just walked. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. But in full ownership of his energy. And to her? That silence isn't just unsettling. It's unforgettable. Because here's the truth, most men leak power. Every over-explanation? Leak. Every needy text? Leak. Every time you try to fix, to convince, to prove you're different? Leak, leak, leak. She feels every drop. And the more you leak, the more she loses respect. Not because she's cruel, but because it's natural. A woman cannot admire a man who needs her approval to stand tall. You don't maintain your masculine edge by being agreeable. You maintain it by being sovereign. And sovereignty looks like this. You hear her accusations and don't defend. You feel her distance and don't chase. You watch her play games, and you don't react. You don't match her chaos. You anchor it. And that's rare. That's what makes you stand out. Not your words. Not your looks. Not your promises. But your unshakable presence. You see, a woman's tests are not the problem. Her tests are your training. Every time she pulls away emotionally, she's not trying to destroy you. She's subconsciously checking. Can this man hold his frame? Or will he collapse like all the others? And the second you collapse, when you spiral into panic, doubt, begging, she knows you're not the one. But the man who stays still? Who stays grounded? He doesn't pass her test with force. He passes it by not playing. You don't tame feminine chaos with control. You tame it with order. Your inner order. And order means you control your breath. You control your voice. You control your need for her reaction. You become a fortress. She may storm the gates, but she finds no entry. And the moment she realizes she can't breach you emotionally, that's when she begins to respect you. And respect is the gateway to real desire. Let's drop some Nietzsche again. Man is something that shall be overcome. That means the old you, the reactive, approval-seeking, emotional version of you, has to die. Because as long as he lives, he will sabotage every connection you enter. He will turn your strength into need. Your purpose into obsession. Your vision into tunnel vision, for her. But when that old self dies, when you kill that boy inside who needs her to choose you, you don't just become a better man. You become a man she can't ignore. Because now, you are purpose-driven. She is no longer the center. You are. Your mission. Your legacy. Your silence is no longer a reaction. It's a declaration. I don't chase validation. I attract alignment. And that, ironically, is when she starts chasing you. You see, the feminine doesn't crave logic. She craves polarity. And polarity is created when a man is anchored so deeply in who he is, he becomes unchangeable in the face of emotional storms. You don't have to out-talk her. You don't have to out-argue her. You just have to out-quiet her. Not to punish, but to reveal. Reveal that you don't operate on emotional currency anymore. That her approval isn't your fuel. That your mood isn't determined by her love. That's the kind of silence that makes her reconsider everything. Suddenly, she starts to notice. You're not posting to get her attention. You're not texting just to check in. You're not lingering in her orbit, hoping she comes back around. You've moved on, without saying a word. And that silence? That's when she realizes. This man wasn't bluffing. Because most men fake indifference. They do no contact just to get a response. But you're done. Done performing. Done begging. Done trying to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And here's the paradox that breaks her. She only values the man who doesn't need her. Not because she wants to feel rejected, but because she wants to feel inspired. To step up. To meet your standard. To be invited, not begged. To be led, not chased. So be that man. The one who can sit in silence for weeks. Not because he's playing hard to get, but because he's busy building himself. Working out. Stacking money. Expanding vision. Sharpening mind. Building discipline. Not reacting to drama. She'll notice. Not on day 1. Not even day 5. But on the day she expects you to break, and you don't. That's when her illusion shatters. She finally sees the truth. You never needed her to stay. You just gave her the chance. And she blew it. Now the power dynamic flips. Now, she's the one explaining. She's the one wondering. She's the one who can't sleep at night. And you're already gone. Because the man who learns to weaponize silence is the man who doesn't ask for respect. He commands it. There comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes. It was never about getting her back. It was about getting himself back. Because when a woman leaves, or disrespects, or pulls away, it's easy to think you lost her. But most men? They didn't lose a woman. They lost their masculine frame. They lost their mission. They lost the mirror that made them realize they'd stopped being him. And here's what the masculine must learn. Your power isn't in persuasion. Your power is in position. The moment you step out of your seat at the throne to chase her down the hallway, you've already lost. You left your kingdom for a peasant negotiation. And she feels it. Because women don't follow men who chase. They follow men who lead. Men who don't leave their post. Men who make the world move, not by noise, but by presence. The kind of presence that says, I'm not here to win you over. I'm here to build an empire. You're either on board, or you're in the way. That kind of energy? It's magnetic. It's threatening. It's rare. Because very few men are willing to become that version of themselves. Most would rather stay emotionally entangled. Check her story. Overthink the silence. Text again, just in case. Hope for a sign. But a king doesn't wait for signs. A king sets the standard. And he doesn't lower it because someone couldn't rise. Understand this. A woman will never value what you don't protect. So if you're giving your time, your energy, your attention to someone who isn't reciprocating with respect, you are training her to despise you. Not because she's cruel, but because even she knows. A man who gives away his power isn't worthy of mine. This is the law of masculine-feminine dynamics. She needs to feel you as an immovable force. Not a flexible boy. Not a negotiator of self-worth. But a man. A man who doesn't argue his value, he embodies it. And if she can't meet you there? You don't beg. You don't explain. You exit. Not out of ego. Out of honor. See, too many men think walking away is weakness. But that's because they're walking away in pain. You're not. You're walking away in principle. And that's a different kind of silence. It doesn't scream, I'm hurt. It whispers, I've healed. She can't toy with that man. She can't guilt that man. Because that man doesn't operate on emotional debt. He's already paid the price in solitude. He's already faced his own darkness. And when you face your own darkness, no woman can use hers to manipulate you. Let's get biblical for a moment. Even Jesus went to the desert. Not to be seen. Not to be praised. But to fast. To be tested. To become. And maybe that's where you are now. In your own desert. Facing the silence. The doubt. The loneliness. Good. This is your becoming. This is where the boy dies. And the man is born. You don't need her to see it. You need to see it. Because once you do, she can't ignore it. You'll speak differently. Move differently. Love differently. Not from fear, but from clarity. You'll stop chasing connection. And start creating standards. You'll stop asking, does she want me? And start asking, does she deserve access? And that switch? That's when the game changes. Because the woman who used to ignore you will now feel your absence like a ghost in the room. Not because you were loud, but because you were solid. And now? You're gone. You gave her one chance to experience a man on his path. And she mistook it for desperation. She confused your patience for neediness. She tried to play chess with someone who wasn't even in the arena. And now she's left with silence. Not passive silence. Powerful silence. The kind of silence that says, I'm not mad. I'm just not available anymore. And that cuts deeper than anger ever could. Because now she has to ask herself, why didn't he chase me? Why isn't he watching my stories? Why hasn't he reached out? And here's the answer. Because you're finally busy living. Finally busy building. Finally busy becoming the man who doesn't ask for love. He commands it through his essence. You're no longer the man who hopes to be seen. You're the man who makes people regret not seeing him sooner. And maybe she'll come back. Maybe she won't. But by then, you won't care. Not because you're numb, but because you've ascended. And when you ascend, you don't return to old vibrations. You don't need to prove she lost something. You just need to become what she can never have again. That's your revenge. Not spite. Silence. Not blocking. Building. Not playing games. Becoming the game. And the final truth is this. The greatest flex is not making her miss you. It's making yourself unreachable. Because you finally realized. You were the prize all along. And now, we've come to the end. But for you, this is the beginning. The beginning of a life without begging. A life without chasing. A life where your worth is no longer tied to someone else's presence. Because here's the truth. The woman was never the point. She was the mirror. The divine disruptor. The trigger sent to wake you up. Not to punish you, but to prepare you. See, every man has a season in his life where the world strips him bare. Takes what he thought he couldn't live without. And then whispers. Now, show me who you are without it. That's when the old self dies. The ego. The fantasy. The fear of being alone. And what's born in its place? Stillness. Discipline. Power. Not the loud kind. The quiet, unshakable kind. The kind that doesn't need revenge. Doesn't need to be seen. Doesn't need to win her back. Because he finally realized. He never lost anything. He just forgot who he was. Let me remind you. You are not a man defined by how she feels. You are a man defined by how you move. You move with purpose. With clarity. With direction. You don't send just one more text. You send a message. With your actions. With your absence. With your elevation. Because absence is not passive. It's a boundary. A declaration. An energy that says, I gave you access to a man in progress. And you mistook his love for weakness. You thought his softness meant he had no spine. You thought his patience meant he had no options. You thought his presence meant he'd always be around. But now? Now she scrolls through her feed and sees a ghost. Not because you vanished. But because you outgrew the version of you that needed her validation. Let's be real. Every king was once a fool for the wrong woman. That's part of the process. But the difference between the ones who stay fools and the ones who become kings? Discipline. The discipline to walk away. To not respond. To not engage. To not need closure. Because your healing is not in her reply. It's in your rebirth. You become a king the moment you stop chasing the crown. And start building the kingdom. And a kingdom is not built on likes, or texts, or what-ifs. It's built on routines, systems, boundaries, discipline, standards, vision. Because when you have vision, you stop looking backward. You stop wondering what could have been. And start creating what will be. And that vision? That's what attracts the right woman. Not the sad, nostalgic version of you she remembers. But the man on fire. The one with a schedule. A mission. A code. A man who knows. If you couldn't respect me at my healing, you don't get access to me at my ascension. So what now? You build. Relentlessly. Not out of revenge. But out of reverence, for the man you're becoming. You train your body. Not for aesthetics. But to remind yourself what discipline feels like. You build systems. Daily habits. Sacred rituals. Because you know now. Freedom is earned through structure. You cut distractions. Delete the apps. Ignore the noise. Because the man you're becoming is rare. And rare men do not waste energy proving themselves to those who couldn't see their value the first time. You stop seeking peace in other people. And start creating it in your environment. Your morning. Your mind. Your mission. You stop needing her to get it. And start loving the fact that you do. Because here's the thing. If a woman didn't see your value, that doesn't mean you weren't valuable. It means you were in the wrong chapter. Trying to explain your story. To someone who was never meant to finish the book. And now? You're not asking for anyone to read it. You're writing a new one. So remember this, and remember it well. You don't get your power back by proving it. You get your power back by protecting it. You don't need her to text back. You don't need her to regret it. You don't need the universe to punish her. You just need to keep building. Until the man she took for granted becomes the man she can no longer reach. Because the new you? He doesn't text at 2 a.m. He doesn't overthink silence. He doesn't beg for respect. He embodies it. And if she ever comes back? She'll find a man who still loves deeply, still moves with heart, still leads with presence, but no longer gives his throne to someone who couldn't recognize a king when he was still rising. This is your season of silence. Not the silence of defeat, the silence of becoming, the silence of sharpening your sword, of rebuilding the walls, of becoming a man who doesn't ask, will she love me again? But one who asks, am I proud of the man I've become? And when the answer is yes, that's when you win. Not because you got her back, but because you got you back. And that was the whole point all along.